Welcome to the wide receiver FanDuel breakdown. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. With me is Justin Elick at Big Italy 42. Taking a look at FanDuel wide receivers, and always we're kind of locked and loaded at this position. Always kind of tough cuts to make. Before we get into it, I mean, did anyone you feel like just missed the cut?
It was tough on FanDuel because, especially the first week, we're kind of waiting to see what happens with new defenses, new offenses also, things like that. So, as I was looking, there's a couple guys that I've mentioned, like in passing on here, Doug Baldwin, Eric Decker. I think those guys are good cash game options. Obviously, we saw Doug Baldwin have a big ceiling last year. I don't really think that's going to be the case necessarily this year, but I still think he's a really safe option. I mean, his season-long numbers aren't great aside from the fact that he had a million touchdowns, 14 actually, but if you look at it, he was incredibly consistent in the second half of the year, about 8 targets a game. So he was the guy that I felt weird leaving off. But outside of that, there's plenty of guys I consider. But yeah, most of the guys I got in here.
Yeah. And Julio Jones, your first one here. One of the safest options around. He's the tier 1 type guy. And obviously going up against a Bucs secondary who you reference is kind of being one of the easier ones to target against.
Yeah, last year for me, most weeks in cash games, it was, do I want Julio or Antonio Brown? And can I fit both if there's a lot of value? I think that Julio, not that Antonio Brown's not safe by any means, but he obviously – Antonio's got a much tougher matchup this week. He's going to see some Josh Norman, so less than ideal. Obviously, Brown is matchup proof, which pains me to say as a Bengals fan, but it's just the truth. The guy is unbelievable. But, with Julio Jones, I think a great thing with him is obviously you got Alex Mack now, kind of bolstering that terrible offensive line from last year, which is why we saw some games Devontae Freeman get 10, 12 targets because Matt Ryan doesn't have more than 2 seconds to get rid of the ball. So, with more time to throw, even with the addition of Mohamed Sanu, who, of course, I'm kind of partial towards as a Bengals fan also. But I don't think it's going to hurt Julio Jones. I think it's going to help him because, there's more guys for defenses to worry about, more time for Matt Ryan to throw the ball. He was able to get the ball to Jones, with no time to throw. So I think he's going to have an even bigger year than he had last year. And people think he's going to lose production. I think that's crazy.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And as you stated here, 203 targets last season for Jones. That's what you want for cash game wide receivers. You want that volume. 10 more than Antonio Brown, as you mentioned, target at least 10 times in 14 to 16 contests. So it's pretty safe. He's going to get that workload either way. He's just that type of receiver.
And he's third most expensive. It's the minimal difference, but still, he's not even the most expensive guy.
Right. That's another good point. If you need that extra couple hundred, there's no shame in dropping down a little bit.
Yeah.
Next one here, you talk about Amari Cooper, obviously one of the lead wide receivers in Oakland in this pretty talented passing attack. And obviously this game in general is going to be a popular one. And obviously you're looking at that Raiders side to really exploit this Saints defense.
Oh, yeah. And Derek Carr, I'm a big Derek Carr fan. And I mentioned here, if you haven't seen it, I don't know if you've seen it, the video of Derek Carr throwing the behind-the-back spiral. No. I'm not sure if it was Cooper who was running, but I'm assuming after practice. You're probably not allowed to screw around during practice. But behind the back, I'm talking perfect spiral, in route. Caught him in stride, 20 yards down the field, behind his back. It was insane. But obviously that has zero relevance to this. But that duo, I think, was kind of inconsistent last year at times, but we saw Cooper make some unbelievable plays in the open field, make some ridiculous catches. He's big, he's fast, he's strong, and I think 7,100 I think is an insanely cheap price there. Due to his inconsistencies, I was kind of on the fence on him as a cash game option. If he was like 8K, maybe he'd be priced out for me, but 7,100, he's going to see 8, 9, 10, maybe even more targets if this one's high scoring, and I think he should, in my mind, be a top 5 wide receiver this week, and he's definitely not priced like one.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I do expect this one to be high scoring. I know we were talking a little about the Oakland defense. It will be improved, but we just kind of expect a shootout, as we always see really inside the Superdome there with Drew Brees and his offenses, regardless of really who's around him. You also, as you mentioned, around that price range, you talked about Doug Baldwin a little bit earlier, Eric Decker, 6,700, 6,900. So that price range, there are some decent options there.
Yeah, and I mean that Saints. I don't know if the Saints' defense is worse or their offense is better at home. I guess their defense is always bad, but I mean that's been a profitable strategy for years. It's you play anyone who's big or fast or anyone who might catch or touch a football against the Saints. I mean, it's especially a guy who's just as gifted athletically as Cooper. I think it's going to be, I won't say easy, but he's not going to have to work too hard.
No, I definitely agree with you. Heading into the GPP section here, looking at Sammy Watkins taking on the Baltimore defense that did struggle, especially in the passing game last season. I'm a big fan of Sammy Watkins, and you and I are both in agreement here. So, I mean, what about him especially do you like here?
I mean, like you said, the matchup, if you look on paper, it doesn't look like the Ravens were necessarily terrible through the air, but I think it's another one of those scenarios where they were also down a lot. And you see teams running the ball because you don't need to score any more points. And obviously a lot of that had to do with Flacco getting hurt and Steve Smith getting hurt and, the offense not scoring a lot of points. But, this is not a particularly good defense. And people still, I won't say everyone, but there are still people who see Baltimore and they just assume that it's, a top-tier defense. And it's definitely not that. And that Tyrod Taylor-Sammy Watkins connection, I mean, he only played in 13 games last year. Scored 9 touchdowns, I think it was. Missed 3 games and scored 9 touchdowns and 17.5 yards per catch, 6th best in the NFL. So, I mean, he's a deep threat. He's a big target in the red zone. I mean, the guy can do it all.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I mean, with an apology to Robert Woods, there really is no solid secondary option in
And that was not a sincere apology. That was just, I mean, Robert Woods is better than I am, but he's not good.
Yeah, I mean – we're going to see, I mean, hopefully we're going to see Watkins get force-fed like a true wide receiver one. I think that's going to be the case. And as you mentioned, I mean, I like the stacking potential there as far as upside with Taylor, putting him with Watkins.
Yeah.
So next one here, you talk about Mike Evans. I mean, possibly another situation where you could get a little game flow of back and forth, Atlanta and Tampa. Obviously, Mike Evans, I mean, coming off a season where struggled a little bit, wasn't quite the production we saw in his rookie year, but certainly I'm in a belief that he's going to have a bounce back year.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like a lot of Mike Evans' struggles last year were not necessarily his fault. A lot of it was inconsistencies by young quarterback. And like you said, he did have a big drop-off. 2 years ago, 2014, he had 12 touchdown catches. But if you look past the touchdowns, though, 2014, he had 122 targets, 68 catches, just over 1,000 yards, 15.5 yards per reception. But then last year, in one less game, he actually had 155 more yards, 6 more receptions, and almost 1 more yard per catch. So, if you're looking at it, really the only thing that's been slowing him down has been Jameis Winston. And so if he can get it going, I mean, Mike Evans might be my favorite player in the entire league. I just love how good – I mean, he made Johnny Manziel look good. I mean – not in the NFL, of course, but because that wasn't possible. But, I mean, Mike Evans is just – he's so good. And Winston just needs to find a way to get the ball in his hands because, the Vincent Jackson story is ending very soon, and it's going to be just the Mike Evans show all year. And I think I'm going to take advantage of – I wouldn't say it's a cheap price tag, but I don't think his price tag will be this low for long. If he has the season I think he's going to have, he's going to be up there, just behind the elite guys pretty soon.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think you're going to get him at some low ownership because, I mean, as you kind of touched on here, Desmond Trufant, did limit number 1 wide receivers, but you know what? I like Mike Evans. Big guy, as you stated, 6'5", 231 pounds. I mean, he's just a freak athlete. They get him away from him. I could definitely see 100 yards in a score. I don't think that's out of the question there.
Yeah, and I just think that matchup with Trufant will definitely keep his ownership down, so that'll make him a nice lower because there is a lot of chalk this week, and Mike Evans is definitely not the chalk.
No, definitely not. Talking value next, Tajay Sharp for the Titans. Obviously, this one's been kind of a hot topic over the last few weeks with him opening up. Obviously, Justin Hunter gone, Dorial Green-Beckham gone. Sharp has looked good, kind of scary good, so I think he could be a nice weapon, and you certainly agree, especially at that price tag.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not an ideal matchup, I guess, against Minnesota. They're an above-average defense. But last year they were 25th against number 2 wide receivers. Obviously, that's kind of subjective because maybe he'll end up being the number 1. There really is no number 1 there, but you assume he's going to kind of step into the number 2, number 3 role starting off. But This is the type of play that if you're not playing him in your cash games and he has a big game, you're making up ground quick elsewhere or you're going to lose because he's going to be really popular this week. And it's not to say that he's going to necessarily have a great game because, like I said, it's not an ideal matchup, but he's cheap. He's going to be popular. So if you're going to fade him, I think the spot would definitely be GPPs because I'm not sure that I can fade him in most of my cash games here.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, there's quite a few of those plays where we've kind of hinted about in other pods and articles where you just don't want to go. They might not be the best of matchups, but it's just like they're going to be so chalky where even if they do anything remotely average, you're kind of getting killed.
Yeah, you're going to hate yourself more for the fade than you are for just sucking up the subpar effort.
Yeah. And I mean, next one here, you're talking about a rookie, Sterling Shepard for the Giants, 5,600. I mean, what do you expect out of this game? Do you think this one's going to be back and forth?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at Eli Manning against Dallas last year, and he actually didn't have over 200 yards in either game. I don't want to say that's fluky, obviously having 2 games, but, I'm expecting more of, the Cowboys-Giants games we were seeing in 2013-14, where, you're seeing a lot of balls thrown down the field. Obviously, with the Cowboys, we're not as sure what to expect, but we know with the Giants, unless Rashad Jennings all of a sudden is consistent, which I'm not expecting him to be. I know he has potential, et cetera, but I mean, still has not consistently been productive, and no one really has for the Giants in years now. So I'm just expecting a huge, heavy dose of Eli Manning throwing the ball all over the field. Obviously, Beckham's going to be popular. Victor Cruz, I'm definitely not going to be playing him right now, especially because he's, more expensive. But I just think Sterling Shepard, he looks good, and Beckham said he looks good. He tweeted him and with the one number higher than the number he had in his rookie year, receiving yards. So Beckham's hyping him up. He sees himself in him a little bit. Obviously, I don't expect him to be Odell Beckham anytime soon, but I definitely expect him to be a big part of that offense.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, people often kind of forget. I mean, you want to talk about high tempo. Giants, man, they move the ball. I mean, they run that no huddle. They're throwing the ball. I mean, Eli Manning was, I believe, top 5, top 7 in passing attempts per game last year. So,
yeah,
a lot of solid production from that receiving core.
Yeah, Eli gets no respect. I mean, he had, what was it, like 35 to 12 touchdowns, interceptions last year, and everyone wants to just blame his team. Like, blame the team for sure. I mean, it's not Eli Manning, and I don't feel like anybody's really on Eli that much this week. I keep seeing people say play Beckham, but not Eli. But I drafted Eli in like every season-long league. I do still play season-long. Yeah, exactly. And you can get him way too late in your drafts too, which you probably already drafted them.
Yeah, you probably did.
Hopefully.
So that's going to wrap things up with the FanDuel wide receiver breakdown. Be sure to check out DaveFantasyCafe.com for all great tools and content.